we have a surprise today with us because there are the people who were announced as speakers for today's presentation, but we are lucky to have from Paris, Liz Alderman, who is a New York Times reporter, chief business reporter of Paris Bureau, I believe that's the correct title. And she recently wrote about the way in which Paris and its environs are using water to move freight. And we saw that, we were excited. And so we invited Liz to join us this morning. Unfortunately, City Tech wouldn't spring for the plane fare to get her over here in person. So we are going to have to satisfy ourselves with Zoom. And I would thank Liz very much for coming. Now, Liz is on a tight schedule over there, so she's going to speak for 10 minutes or so. We'll be able to ask her some questions, and then she has to go. But we do appreciate the time that she is going to spend here in Brooklyn. And Liz, thank you very much. And let's see, I think you have your mic off right now, but let's see. Good, there we go.
Yeah, here I am. Well, thank you so much, Richard. First of all, for the invitation, and first of all, for reading the story. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, just by way of introduction, as Richard mentioned, I'm Liz Alderman. I'm the chief business correspondent for the New York Times. I'm based in Paris, but I write about business and economics all around Europe, with a focus on environmental issues, among other things. And I was drawn to this story basically because, you know, Europe is right now trying to move forward to implement a very ambitious plan called the European Green Deal, in order to essentially try to become, you know, fully carbon free by 2050. That's, as you can imagine, an extremely tall hurdle. And then they have markers that are set along the way to 2050, in terms of trying to slash carbon output in various ways, for example, by 2030, et cetera. And so one of the main places that they're looking at is transportation, because transportation accounts for about a quarter of all greenhouse gas output. And I was just fascinated. As I was doing reporting on aspects of the European blueprint, to see that one of the things that they want to do is basically turn back to this old-fashioned, this ancient mode of transport to try and help, and that is to turn back to its rivers. Europe has, about 23,000 miles of rivers. That includes canals, obviously stretching everywhere from, Spain through the Netherlands to really, all across the continent. And so the idea is basically to get much more cargo transported on river barges, in a bid to sort of take them off of trucks, which make up more than 80% of the way that goods are delivered across Europe. And so with our photographer James Hill, we wanted to take a look at the Seine River in France, which is pretty symbolic of not only the effort that Europe is undertaking, but also sort of the hurdles that it faces. The biggest river in Europe is actually the Rhine, which runs through Germany. But the Seine is very interesting because it is a place where authorities have already committed more than €1 billion to upgrading infrastructure, things like ports. Also, trying, basically you have these, companies that are sort of, building more barges. And then you also have other companies, like IKEA, that are working on other parts of this sort of, carbon-free chain, developing, carbon-free methods for the last mile of delivery. So in this story that was featured on the front page of the New York Times, we sort of had an example of IKEA, IKEA's goods arriving at this port that's right outside of Paris, and then being put onto a barge and then transferred, via barge to the center of Paris, right near Notre Dame, and then being unloaded onto little electric trucks that they had made specially for them. We also have other things that are going on in this other company that I had mentioned in the story called Fluidis, which is it's an electric boat, and inside the boat they have electric bicycles that basically sort of deliver goods. The boat kind of goes along the Seine, and it'll stop at the foot of the Eiffel Tower or something, and then people will kind of ride out of the boat and deliver everything from coffee to copier paper to businesses with an electric bicycle. So and when Richard contacted me, he mentioned that you all were are looking or sort of hoping, I guess, to do something similar where you are. And so that's why he invited me to I guess just come and say hello and to sort of, I guess, sort of set the framework for how things are going here in Europe, and to just again reiterate that it is a pretty long road ahead. They're sort of just beginning. It's very expensive. There are other challenges, like the fact that this type of thing is being pursued to try and combat climate change, and yet at the same time climate change holds a potential threat, in the sense that we've been seeing dryness in rivers, or river levels going down more and more frequently with every passing year. So that's sort of this kind of cycle that they're trying to break. And that's basically sort of, I guess, a step back look at, what we found when we decided to take a look at the Seine River in France as sort of a lens to look at, what's happening, what the ambitions are more broadly over here in Europe. So I'd be happy to answer questions if you all have any questions, or maybe to hear a little bit about what your initiatives are, or what your hopes and plans are, and what's happening over there. So I'll hand it over to you all.
Okay, so are there questions? We don't have a mic to circulate, so I'll repeat. Yes, someone is asking about community outreach or approval for these efforts, Liz.
Mm-hmm. Whether there's community, whether the community is being consulted, or
that is community consultation and
mm-hmm.
community input, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well, actually, that's an interesting question. In France and a lot of these European countries, initiatives like this tend to come from the top down, as it were, in the sense that policymakers together, with scientists, came up with this big idea, with this big blueprint, and what's been happening. I don't know the answer if there have been community outreach efforts, but for example, one of the main things that's driving this is the fact that cities like Paris and other big cities in Europe are also doing things like they're going to start banning polluting, engines in the coming years, and some of them have already done so. So that's basically spurred, businesses and like small businesses and whatnot to find ways to sort of meet these new environmental standards. and carbon reduction rules. So, for example, in the case of this company Fluidis, that this guy, he basically invested in a couple of small boats driven by electric motors, and then in the electric bicycles, and he put that out on the market, and he has businesses, cafes, LVMH, the American Embassy are all customers of his now. So, I mean, in terms of local community outreach, I guess it wasn't terribly necessary in the sense that people in Paris, for example, voted for a mayor who has a green agenda, and she had made very clear that if she was elected, she would be putting these policies into place. So that's sort of more how it works over here.
Okay, thank you. You have yes. Someone wants to know if there is workforce development in place to supply the workers for these specialized maritime jobs.
If there's workforce development. So that's a very interesting question. As part of our reporting, we followed this riverboat captain, Captain Freddie Badar, who's the third generation actually of riverboat captains in his family. And one of the concerns that he has is that actually, sort of like farmers over here, this sort of generation of people who are captains, basically, whose this type of job has been sort of passed on from generation to generation. They're retiring, and they're having a hard time finding people to take their place. So some European countries are putting incentives into place. They're advertising these types of jobs. They're basically providing training programs. For example, if you want to convert from being maybe a truck driver to a riverboat driver, there are training programs that various governments are making available, or that companies are making available. In the case of this electric boat that I was mentioning, they also have training programs. They also hire, immigrants, or even people they would recruit, even, for example, from the unemployment office, to see if there are any takers to basically get on these bicycles and, wheel around Paris on an electric bike. And it's a pretty good job, and more jobs are coming. One thing that struck me is that all along this chain, as we were reporting out, is we met a number of small startups that hadn't existed a few years ago, that had now started to grow up because of this demand of, whether it was companies like IKEA that contracted a company to make these custom made electric minivans for them to drive around town. And then the company this company called Suggestron, which makes a lot of barges, they hired also a lot more people to basically, handle the cargo and to kind of, work these boats. Jobs are also being created in things like the development of hydrogen powered barges, or, for electric batteries. So there's this kind of, new crop of jobs that are springing up around this big initiative. But it is interesting that, the boat captains themselves are kind of a dying breed. And that's one of the challenges that, the industry is facing at a time when it's actually hoping to build up.
Okay, thank you. We have, just 3 more questions. Yes. Okay, someone asks, is the transportation sector responsible for only 25% of the greenhouse gases? It seems low to the questioner.
Yes. Well, a quarter of all, freight transport, it's freight transport specifically is responsible for a
Just
quarter
freight.
of
Okay.
all
All right.
of global greenhouse gas
So,
emissions.
right. Okay. And the person there, yes. Okay. So the question is, this is reporting, not research. There's probably a difference. You should know, seriously. But the questioner wants to know if there was information about trips not taken or truck trips not made because of the use of water?
Yeah, that's a great question. That was something that we ourselves were very interested to know about. In the case of, so for the story again, in following Captain Freddie Badar on his barge Le Bosphore, just to take him as an example, I am just looking it up really quickly. That boat basically travels back and forth between Le Havre, which is the largest port in France. It's in northern France, and Paris. And what did I have in the story? Sorry. Yes, Le Bosphore. It's so that barge it's longer than a soccer field. It takes more than 100. It takes about 120 trucks off the road, and it carries as many containers, basically truck-sized containers. And then that single boat, just as an example, saves 18,000 truck trips a year between Le Havre and Paris. And basically, what the French government is saying is that the Seine River could handle 4 times as much freight. Um, so just using the example of that one barge, you can see that it's pretty significant. And we had also spoken with another company, France's biggest supermarket chain, which has actually been using barges for a decade to transport, kind of dry goods to the center of Paris at the foot of the Eiffel Tower, from which it's then kind of fanned out to a bunch of little supermarkets throughout Paris. And they are able to save, according to them, 3,600 truck trips a year on highways, and it's cut the company's carbon emissions by 20%.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
yeah.
And the last question, David? Question is 2 parts. One, is there resistance from unions? And 2, are there infrastructure problems like locks and the rest as the barges pass through? And that'll be the last question. Then we'll thank you very much for coming, and we'll take up no more of your time. Thank you. Okay.
Those are good questions. Well, first of all, as I'm sure you all know, France is famous for strikes. Um, Interestingly, during our reporting, we didn't hear about any union opposition to this at all. And yeah, I mean, you know, where things could be affected is that sometimes at various ports like Le Havre, occasionally there will be worker strikes, but not because of this. I mean, interestingly, there doesn't seem to be a lot of opposition to this union wise. What is interesting is that in Brussels, though, there is this kind of fight going on where the trucking industry, which really doesn't want to lose business over time, is pretty concerned about the idea of moving more freight from trucks onto barges because they would lose business. And so there's been this kind of lobbying battle that's been going on in Brussels with the trucking industry pushing back. The trucking industry is also trying to innovate greatly. I mean, they have also sort of accelerated their push to convert trucks, to electric battery power. But that's this whole other bigger game. And at the end of the day, they don't really want to lose this huge piece of the pie that they have. So that's a battle that's kind of still basically playing out in Brussels right now. And I'm sorry, the second part of your question.
Second part of the question had to do with infrastructure or lock, or as the boats and barges moved up and down the river.
So yes, that's a very good question. And in fact, I mean, when we're talking about the hurdles that need to be overcome, this remains a big one because a lot of that infrastructure is decades old. And also because of the way that climate change has been impacting the level of rivers. We're seeing them either kind of dwindle, earlier in the year because the weather's just getting hotter and hotter. But then in the wintertime, in some places, we've been having excessive amounts of rain. So then there can be flooding. So it's just river levels are getting kind of more erratic. And then the infrastructure is decades old in a lot of places. And yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that governments have identified is the need to basically invest in upgrading that infrastructure is a big piece of how this puzzle is going to have to work. So, for example, in France, they're already starting by trying to upgrade, Le Havre port in a variety of ways. But one of the things that experts that we spoke to said is certainly that if this were to really work on a widespread basis, definitely that infrastructure needs to be upgraded as well. So,
Liz, I'm going to impose on you one more time because we do have quite a considerable number of people on Zoom this morning. So here's one question. It says, this raises the policy question of how we apportion the usable waterfront among many competing parties, recreational waterfront, working waterfront, and residential waterfront, not to mention the environmental issues that are reducing usable waterfront. What do you see leading this discussion and planning among those competing waterfront uses? And that's the last one. Thank you. But I did want to, we
that's
have
okay.
a lot of people on Zoom. I wanted them to get a question.
Well, these are all really good questions. This particular question, I mean, I can only sort of speak for, let's say, a city like Paris. I mean, what we have, the situation in Paris is that, there's a port that's outside of Paris. That's sort of the main kind of industrial ports for goods that would be coming into the city. So, and then of course, in the center of Paris itself, the entire waterfront is pretty much converted for community use and for recreational use. Even highways, the current mayor, Anne Hidalgo, basically suppressed the freeways that were along the Seine several years ago and has converted all of that basically to pedestrian use. So it's not, the city itself is not necessarily a kind of a mixed, people sort of industrial area. But even, I mean, and in a place like Le Havre port, it's fully a port area. But I think there's a feeling that sort of these rivers, there's enough river for everybody, in the sense that at least here in France, we haven't really had a situation where communities are being, pushed out or anything like that, due to this type of construction. And there are many basically ways that individuals and communities can basically have access to the river. So far from what we could tell, at least in France, there hasn't been a big conflict like that. But the situation might be different where you all are. And I'd be curious to know if that's the case, and if so, what is the discussion going on there about how to resolve it?
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, Liz, you're welcome to stay and hear our other panelists as they talk about visions for using the waterways around New York for the movement of freight. Our first speaker, thank you. Oh, can you hear the round of applause?
I can't, but I appreciate it. I very much appreciate you having me. And unfortunately, I'd love to stay, but since I can't, Richard, I'll count on you to send me an update of what you guys wound up talking about. I would really appreciate that.
We will do that. So,
okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. So the way our first speaker today is going to be Jim Tempakis. And Jim Tempakis, as I was saying, born and bred in Brooklyn. Actually, he got his first degree here at City Tech when it was a community college. And then he went on to get a degree at Baruch. He and his family have been in the maritime business for how many generations now?
2 generations, but since right after the Korean War.
since right after the Korean War. And so he knows whereof he speaks, and he has had a vision of what things could look like, especially with the big box delivery centers that are going up along the Brooklyn waterfront. Jim.
Good morning. My name is Jim Tampakis. I am been in Red Hook for the last 50 years in the marine business, and we are dwindling. When I first came into Red Hook, everything was marine, and now there's just a couple of businesses that are still doing marine. So Red Hook is approximately 1 square mile inland with water on 3 sides. The highways, all the trucks that are coming in. So about 5 or 6 years ago, we started having all of these real estate developments come in and buying up all of our waterfront property, which unfortunately became all these last mile warehouses. So these last mile warehouses are high cube warehouses. Normal warehouses that we're used to are 14, 15 foot high. These guys are 28 to 32 feet high. Up to now, we've had approximately 2 million square feet of built warehouses, and we're waiting now on another 1.2 million square feet to see if UPS is going to start. That's on the Buttermilk Channel. So, so we've had approximately 2 million square feet of buildings, and we're looking at an additional 1 million square feet if UPS decides to proceed. I spoke to somebody at UPS this week, and they told me they still are in a holding pattern before they press the button to start with their 1.2 million square foot facility that's on the Buttermilk Channel again on the water. So these trucks that are coming in now to load these warehouses are coming from basically Pennsylvania and New Jersey. And they're going over the Goethals Bridge, the Verrazano Bridge, through Staten Island, on the Gowanus Expressway, getting off at Hamilton Avenue or 38th Street, and coming into the neighborhood. The neighborhood in Red Hook, we have 2 streets. Hold on. So we have 2 streets. I'm going to have to bounce around. So we have 2 streets, which are commercial streets. The one is Van Brunt Street, and the other one is Court Street. So these two places are, as you could see, they're one-way streets each way. They're in the middle of commercial traffic. They're in the middle of parks. At this point in Red Hook now, we also have the cruise ships. We got these Jagunda cruise ships that are coming in that are 5,500 passengers. You know, and it's disappointing to come into Red Hook on cruise days because you can't move to go anywhere. So this is a bad picture, but you can see basically these lines are on each one of these facilities. The one on the extreme left is the 1.2 million square feet that again is on the water, which is the UPS site. Then Amazon is the next one over. And then the next one over there is another Amazon site. And then the 55 Bay Street is another Amazon site. And now we got RXR, who is just completing a large facility. I don't know who they're going to be renting to, but as you could see, everything is right on the water. So my thing is, instead of having all of these trucks coming into the neighborhood with these tractor trailers, because if you do some calculations and you figure that on a 100,000 square foot building, if you can load it up at 60%, 100,000 square feet at 60%, but you have a 28-foot ceiling height, comes out to like 1,680,000 cubic feet of space. Each truck is about 2,400 cubic feet. And so it comes out to To do 100,000 square feet, if you do some general basic calculations, it's anywhere from 725 to 875 tractor trailers to bring in freight to these facilities per 100,000 feet. So now, if we have 2 million feet, you're going to multiply that times 20, obviously. So this was 280 Richard Street. So 280 Richard Street is a new Amazon site. I had gone to Amazon before they opened up, and I said, why don't you guys put in a crane like this so that this way you can unload your freight, you can bring it in by water. They weren't interested. Same thing with RXR. Everybody is afraid of using the water for some reason. So Department of Sanitation has probably unloads maybe 400 to 500 containers a day in this facility. They bring the freight in from Jersey, they unload, they're quiet. They have Tier 4 diesel tugboats, which are 85% clean. And we don't hear them, we don't smell them, we don't see them. And this is like all of these containers are getting loaded and unloaded. And like I said, they don't bother us at all. And that's what I would like to see happen in Red Hook and in other parts of the city as well, so that this way we can get all these tractor trailers off the street and out of the neighborhood. So Crowley right now, Crowley Marine, who's a big marine company, they have totally electric tugs. So this way we can go from a Tier 4 diesel to a totally electric tug. And then we'll bring in the freight, bring it to 280 Richard Street, which is this facility that I don't have a picture of, but it's there now. They have 28 loading docks, just so you can understand how big these places are. This is the way the cranes are. So this is basically a picture of New York City's waterfront. And this is Dock NYC sites that the EDC has been working on, upgrading all of these different facilities so that they can have this freight unloaded, in different parts of the city. This isn't enough. We need a lot more, depending on the type of facility, depending on the types of boats that we have. So we would bring in the freight via water, unload them in the containers, bring them to their facilities, like I said, with the Amazon sites, et cetera, and then from there, we would again go out on the water, either from the east side of Red Hook or the west side of Red Hook, and then do the distribution throughout New York City's 520 miles of waterfront. Excuse me. So this is something that they do in Italy. I mean, this is an old picture because I've been talking about this for a lot of years. I know that in Belgium, Antoon, who's with Zulu, out of Belgium, he's designed an electric craft that is something similar where they can unload, they have a crane, and this way they can just go to different parts of the city and unload the freight along the water. They don't really need dock setup. They could just go by and slow down, drop it off, and then just keep going. And, and then have, these kind of containers, whether they're standardized or not, let them move the freight on there. They'll be already pre-designated and loaded for their zip codes, and they'll be going to the different areas, have the driver intercept the container or the whole bicycle and do the last mile delivery. And this way we don't have to deal with traffic, double park cars, et cetera, et cetera. The last thing I wanted to also say is that regarding the cost, I have spoken with the fellow who owns Norfolk Tug and Barge, who is located down in Norfolk. He has the contract with the Department of Sanitation, who has the Tier 4 diesels. And he was telling me, we sat down and did an analysis on to buy 2 cranes and to be able to unload the freight, put them in Red Hook somewhere, amortized over a 20-year period. The freight, the tugboats, the labor, the loading, the unloading, the cranes, all the site work would cost about $304 per 40-foot container, $304. So today, these guys that are coming over the Goethals Bridge, the Verrazano Bridge, right there alone, there's a couple of $100 in tolls. And then the other $100 between labor, insurance, maintenance on the trucks, et cetera, et cetera. And we're totally clean. There's no wear and tear on the highways. We get rid of all the truck traffic that's driving around in the neighborhood. I mean, it's a win-win-win situation. And that's basically what I'd like to see. I mean, we have the ability in New York City to do this. We just got to get our stuff together and go to the next step of, of this stuff. Here's a prime vehicle too. That's basically it. I wanted to just bring that to everybody's attention, and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. We'll take questions at the end, after all of the speakers have spoken. New York City, as many of you probably know, has announced a Blue Highways program, and that's being led by the Department of Transportation and New York City Economic Development Corporation. I've spoken to officials in both and could get no representative here. I don't know why. I mean, I actually spoke to the people in touch but at any rate, so the way we're designing this today is these are visions. So we've had a real broad vision. Now we have another vision that we're going to hear about in a moment. And then we're going to hear about an actual ongoing operation. So that was the structure of today. Thank you, Jim. And our next speaker is Alana Maya Dennis, and she's going to speak about a company called U.S. Coastal Service. And we're going to hear about her company's ideas for doing freight by water.
So thank you, everyone. Happy to be on this panel today. This seems to be a very small world because Brad and Jim and I have all spoken previously. And it's great because we all have this collective vision. It's not that there are multiple opportunities to capitalize on marine freight in New York Harbor. And I rejoined U.S. Coastal Service in December of last year because of the opportunities in marine freight. Just briefly on myself, I had a background in finance, had a change of heart, went to get my master's degree focused on sustainability and the intersection with business, and then worked for PayPal for 3 years doing ESG. So focus on their sustainability strategy. Found my way back to U.S. Coastal Service because I had wanted to marry my interest in sustainability and also my experience briefly working for Amazon Logistics and just seeing all the opportunities there were to integrate sustainability into the operations model. So U.S. Coastal Service, we are a new venture. And I think as Liz had mentioned, there are a number of startups that popped up or were able to participate in the reemergence of marine freight in Europe. And we are one of those in New York Harbor. I am lucky to focus on this as my day job. We had started out originally in 2020 focused on tug and barge opportunities. Because of the pandemic and shifts in corporate priorities, we had kind of taken a step back and we were reignited in fall of 2023. Since then, we've been working on developing a network of marine freight terminals and how to connect them with electrified marine vessels. In the interim, we've been looking to acquire existing assets and repurposing them for marine freight because also, like Liz mentioned and Jim, it's a very capital intensive, operation. and a lot of the infrastructure is old. And so, we see ourselves as kind of the risk taker and hoping to be a catalyst to reignite marine freight in New York Harbor. So as Jim alluded to in his deck, New York City wouldn't be New York City without its waterfront and commerce based on the water. 150 to 100 years ago, there would be hundreds of ships pulling up on New York's waterfront. And so in our mind, we're trying to reimagine commerce and marine freight for today's day and age. So what does that look like? We have a bit of fun looking at some waterfront properties, including in Red Hook, and seeing how can we reimagine and how do we bring sustainable infrastructure and marine freight in a more cost competitive, time competitive, and emissions reductions competitive way. So you'll see here that we have some of our electric vessels that we are envisioning. You may have heard in the New York Times article, as well as Jim mentioned, Zulu Associates and Antoon van Coley. We are also working with him to envision how do we build these vessels that are meant for New York Harbor and can maximize the amount of freight that can move between the boroughs and also New Jersey. So you'll see here, these vessels can carry multiple trailers, they can carry dozens of cargo vans, and they could also carry dozens of e-cargo bikes or the micro containers that get loaded onto these micromobility vehicles. We envision, building a number of marine freight facilities across the boroughs and New Jersey so that we have a network that's connected by these green marine vessels. You'll see here, we're envisioning a site in the Bronx. We had a bit of fun reimagining what Pier 6 could look like in Manhattan, a site in Queens, and a site that we had fun with in Staten Island. So speaking of the Blue Highways RFEI and the RFP opportunities that have been recently released by the DOT and the EDC, we did reply to those because we are excited about the opportunity and we strongly believe in the opportunity. But like Jim mentioned, the city's sites that they are putting forth, we don't believe it's enough. And we think we need to move quickly and we need to build a wider network in order to really maximize the waterfront. So how do we do that? With a network of marine freight terminals and electrifying vessels, we believe we could significantly reduce trucking miles. So for example, depending on the type of cargo you carry on these vessels, if you're moving trailers, we could carry perhaps 16 trailers on a vessel. So you're taking 16 trucks off the road per trip. With how quickly these vessels move as opposed to tug and barge, you could do 8 round trips per day. So you do the math, that's like, 100 trucks off the road, per day, per vessel, per one route. So the more you scale these routes and vessels, the more impact that we could have. There's the prospect of reduced noise pollution. Electric vessels will be quieter. We're also, again, taking trucks and delivery vans off the roads. And so there will be less wear and tear on roads in local communities and less noise pollution. With these marine freight terminals, we also envision installing renewable energy infrastructure. And so how are we going to charge these vessels? And we also want to introduce microgrids and battery storage to where these sites are located. Speaking of workforce development, which I think someone had asked a question about earlier, we strongly believe in the opportunity to train a new workforce in these opportunities, not only in marine freight, but also in renewable energy, solar panel installation, maintenance, captaining the vessels, sustainable logistics. And so we are lucky that our managing partner was the founder of the New York Harbor School and Billion Oyster Project here in New York. And so we are very ready to capitalize on those relationships to create workforce development programs. We also believe, with the hopefully advent of this new reimagined maritime freight in New York Harbor, that we create a lot more jobs. There's a trend, not just creating jobs for micromobility, but stable jobs that are promising and that are preparing the city for the future. So we're just kind of outlining here how we align with, the goals that the city, particularly the EDC, sets forth. And, we hope to have this opportunity, in the very near future. In the short term, we are looking to conduct pilots in the harbor. And so we're working on negotiating short-term sites and capitalizing existing assets to demonstrate the viability of this in the harbor before we make those very expensive investments in, the vessels and the landside upland infrastructure to support, a wide-scale operation.
Okay, I'm to hear these visions, plans, and the way each talks about having the maritime industries grow along the Brooklyn waterfront. It's very exciting, and it's a little plug for something else coming down the road. And on May 10th, we have our annual conference. That's going to be on offshore wind power and how it's coming to Brooklyn. And again, if that happens or when that happens, there will be a lot of maritime jobs that will go along with that also. And so it's possible as the 21st century moves along, the Brooklyn waterfront will not only have the towers of Greenpoint and Williamsburg, but we'll also have the South Brooklyn maritime industries with various kinds of vessels going back and forth. Okay, our next speak. So in terms of today's vision, how's it working in a different place, Paris? What are some visions for how it might work here, Jim and Alana? And now, what is actually an enterprise that's ongoing, and what does that look like? And by the way, I learned that, you learn no matter what you do. I'm an English professor, but still, I learned a new word, supercargo, as a noun. I have to, admit ignorance, and we're going to have a supercargo speak to us. And a month ago, I would have thought there was going to be some walking set of boxes that was going to come on the stage if I heard that. But no, now I understand what a supercargo is, and we have one in our midst. And that is so. Brad Vogel, he works as the supercargo for the sail freight vessel, a schooner Apollonia, operating in New York and New Jersey since 2020. And he moves cargo around New York. He uses the Hudson River. And we also have one of his, not a customer, a partner is the correct term, but we'll hear more about that later. So Brad, would you like to present up here? And we'll get you set up.
Yeah, so while he's getting it set up, I just wanted to hold up this little bottle of absinthe. Oh, and I'll tell you a little bit more as we get going here about why I'm holding this bottle and what it has to do with Brooklyn and what it has to do with waterborne freight. So looking forward to telling that story. I was going to bring the bottle of whiskey, but that seems too much of a temptation. So. Okay, great. And I'm using this. Wunderbar. All right. Okay. Thank you once again. It's really great to be here. And my name is Brad Vogel, as Richard mentioned. And it's really exciting to be here with such a panel because, as has been stated by multiple people now, there are so many different ways to approach this issue of waterborne freight or blue highways. But also, it's going to take everyone in this room, as much as the city has now really started pushing with the Blue Highways initiatives. It is going to take everyone in this room and everyone on the Zoom to actually sort of build a culture that reinforces the policy changes that are being made by the city. Because as we have found in our work with Schooner Apollonia, moving goods by water since 2020, it's one thing to put a system out and to make a pilot run and to find a way to get to cargo. But if ultimately you are throwing that all out into a vacuum and not into a sort of community ethic or business culture that sees this as viable, it's all for naught. And so a lot of what we've done over the last 5 years is try to build this greater awareness that, our friend in Paris earlier mentioned that they were reviving an ancient, and what was the other word she used? Ancient and old-fashioned way of moving goods. And I just want to push back on that and say that is part of the problem, is how we contextualize waterborne freight. It is not old-fashioned. I mean, it is ancient, but I would like to call it proven and obvious. I say that in particular for our venture because we are a sail freight vessel. What does that mean? The vessel that you can see on the screen was built in 1946. She is a steel-hulled schooner built in Baltimore at a proper shipyard. She is a gaff-rigged schooner, and she has been, as I said, running freight on the Hudson River and New York Harbor and the Kills, frankly, and Raritan Bay since 2020. We use the wind to move goods. So, any waterborne freight moving goods intra-harbor or around the region in the coastwise trade, that is taking trucks off the road, that is reducing the overall emissions out there. We try to go a step further and say we are literally going to use our engine about less than 5% of the time, and rely on the wind and the current and the tide quite zealously to actually move our goods. And we are lucky, I'll say, because we're here on the Hudson River, which is an estuary and which has a tidal influence all the way up to Albany. So if there's no wind, we can set a schedule because we know when the tide will eventually get us to a port. So we set those port calls conservatively and go like that. But let's get into it. What is sail freight? I've sort of mentioned this already, but I think an important part of this is, we are in fact working to remove truck trips from the region by moving goods on the water instead. And also our effort is regional. We are connecting up into the Hudson Valley, and that's already a natural and historical flow of materials, and also New Jersey increasingly. And it's human scale. You can see the ship is not enormous. It is about 65 feet long, can haul about 20,000 pounds of cargo at a time. And I just wanted to say also, since we had our French connection earlier, that there is another French connection that you should all be aware of. There is a vessel that is 3 times or more larger than schooner Apollonia that is currently docked at Pier 17 in Manhattan at the seaport, called Grande Sail 2. This is a French company. They have also been moving cargo transoceanic by wind to New York Harbor and back. And they have chiefly to this date moved wine and chocolate, which is a really lovely thing. But they also now, with this huge new vessel, this is its first call at New York, they now have so much capacity that they can actually rent out space to other companies in Europe to send things back. I should also say, I know they are looking for backhaul cargo. So if any of you have things that you need shipped back to France, that is now available. You can see the vessel here is actually in the mouth of Newtown Creek. This is another thing about our boat. We are actually able to operate in some really interesting places that people have not thought about as viable ports for well over 100 years. We managed to get in and get to our customers in a whole array of places. Where do we deliver? This just gives you a snapshot of our realm. We have over 20 proven ports of call at this point. And it's really tricky. Multiple speakers today have talked about how the infrastructure, the waterfront infrastructure, is aged. It is decrepit. It is gone in many cases. It has atrophied away quite hard over the last 80 years. So one thing we have to do is get creative. We dock at places like the Ready Center. And I know Tim, I think, is just out in the hallway at Gowanus Bay Terminal, GBX, on Gowanus Bay. We dock at public parks in some places like Poughkeepsie. I had to be on a call with an artist because in Beacon there was no docking where we deliver malted barley for a brewery. So we have to dock on what is essentially an art installation, which thankfully had, just to be cute, I think, bollards and cleats, but that's actually what we needed. And we went from being a sort of oddity to being honored at Scenic Hudson's gala 3 years later because they realized we were not, just sort of a strange request. We were actually an attraction that got people to come down and do what we do, which was bring transparency to and highlight the logistics chain, which is often completely outside of most people's ken. We don't think about it. The package just poof magically arrives. And I know this room thinks about these things all the time and in great depth. But what we try to do is actually show up at a waterfront and give people sort of a pull behind the veil, and you can see what's happening. And you can learn about, it takes a while with a sail freight vessel to move goods. It definitely it takes several days to move a good from Hudson at the top of our run down to Brooklyn. And that trip might take a fossil fuel powered truck, box truck, less than a day, a couple hours. So there are in fact trade-offs, but we try to show that like what you're doing by using fossil fuels is making up for this other system that was historically the way things were done. First and last mile. So it's not just the water. We have established, I like to say, the trunk of the tree, which is the Hudson River, and we have shown that we can move goods up and down on the river. But then what about the goods getting to and from producers and customers that aren't right at the water's edge? We do our own first and last mile with cargo bike and trailer. We have solar panels on the wheelhouse of the vessel that actually power the e-assist on the cargo bike, which is stored in the hold alongside with the trailer. So you deploy, when you pull up at a dock like this, you deploy your cargo bike from the trailer, or from the hold rather, then the trailer, then the cargo, and you move it inland to either the brewery, the distillery, the bakery, the restaurant, whatever it might be. And I keep saying brewery, and I'm going to keep saying it again because you're about to hear from one of our shipping partners, Jason Saylor at Strong Rope Brewery, who has been, I like to say, as the kids say these days, an OG partner for Schooner Apollonia. He has been there since the beginning and said yes very early on, and it's been a joy because I think, as with this little bottle of absinthe, it's so fun to talk about all this in the abstract, but it is really great to drink the beer in the end, or the rye whiskey, or the absinthe that you have actually moved the ingredients for, but then also moved the end product. We have a whole network of people who help us called Shore Angels. They also use electric vehicles to move things to and from the water's edge to extend our range and sort of grow branches on the trees. And we have, in addition to the break bulk goods that we move, like lumber and stone and things like that, we also do have a boat box subscription, which is basically a shelf-stable CSA that people can get delivered to them in port every time the ship arrives. That's a snapshot of the crew. Captain Sam there at the bottom, who's really been sort of the driving force behind all this, but we do in fact create maritime jobs, and there's a lot of training, as you can imagine, that goes into this. And we are in fact keeping traditional skills alive, but deploying them into the new century. And that's my contact info. If you would like to ship something by wind, please do get in touch. We would love to chat with you. And we're really hopeful that the city, at both EDC and DOT, with these Blue Highways initiatives, looks not just at blue highways, so to speak, sort of major large vessels moving things between just a few nodes, but looks at blue streets, if you will, as in smaller human scale connections can also make a difference. And I'm thinking about places like Venice. When Jim showed that, I was very excited because I was just there a year ago, and I was amazed because when we think of Venice, we think of gondolas and ancient history, but you're there and the workaday infrastructure of that place is all done by boats. It's done completely by work boats, and it's the things that never show up in pictures of Venice that are actually doing that work. So I think New York is primed and has the capacity to keep parks at the water's edge, but make those places viable, very small human scale ports as well, because we do it, and I think it's possible that more ventures could too. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Brad. And that's the great work that you do, and seeing it all. One of the things about the work that I do as Brooklyn Waterfront Research Center, you get to meet all kinds of new people doing new and exciting things. And sometimes you have to go to their place of employment to meet the people. And so myself and my project coordinators who you've seen helping me manage the technology today. We had to go to the place of employment or the place of work of our next speaker. It was a brewery, and we were all very unhappy to have. It was a lovely day, and so there are pictures of us sitting on the shore in Red Hook, drinking some nice cold beer made at the Strong Rope Brewery by Jason Sala and his workers. Jason was a graduate of a program in sustainability. I've just lost my my bios. So he has a degree in sustainability from NYU, and he was a home brewer before going into business. He won some prizes for his home brewing, and then he started brewing commercially, and he has two places, the place Strong Rope Brewery in Red Hook and in Gowanus. So and I do recommend you take a trip there. It's a beautiful, besides the beer being very good, it's a beautiful space, and the views are spectacular. And so, Jason, would you like to sit there or you want to come up? Okay, so great, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you. My name is Jason Saylor, owner of Strong Rope Brewery. We opened in Gowanus in 2015, and then we opened our Red Hook facility in 2021. Our Red Hook facility is right on the water at 185 Van Dyke, just kind of down by the end of Valentino Pier. Our whole kind of ethos at Strong Rope Brewery is to utilize New York malt and hops 100% in all of our beer. So we really trying to recreate or re-energize the brewing agricultural scene in New York. And when I was offered an opportunity to work with Brad, student at Bologna, I took the like, sure. I didn't know what was going to come of it. They just came up to me and said, like, would you like some beer at sale break? Because I'm in the Gowanus at that time. So I was like, I don't know if you're going to get it up to Gowanus. Yeah, so it's going to happen. So it was just an opportunity to take. We, as a brewery, are relatively small. We create 751 barrels a year of beer. That's about 23,000 gallons. And we're kind of on the smaller side, even amongst all the breweries within New York City. We're transporting roughly 60,000 pounds of malt annually from all across the state, and that's about 20 or so trips of trucks, coming from Western New York, the Hudson Valley, and we do work with one maltster that uses New York grains coming from Massachusetts. Our trips from the Hudson River in the winter has about 4 trips per year. It's about 2,000 pounds total. So there's still quite a bit of ways for us to be able to utilize the waterways even more. One of the things that I'm hoping, at this point to do is to kind of continue the growth of working with sail freight or other possible avenues of transportation on the water. And my eventual goal would be to love to see the Erie Canal actually be re-energized into a waterway, because the majority of our grain comes from Batavia, which is west of Rochester, New York, where I'm originally from. So they're right off the canal. So if we could do it, it would be an amazing trip down the Erie Canal through right down the Hudson River. As Brad said, there is some time involved with that, and the current supplier, Hudson Valley Malt, who we're transporting on the schooner, has a very long lead time. So we've already, in March, we placed orders for the first delivery in May, right?
It's supposed to pick you up for June.
Yeah, and we're already getting asked for June, but that is part of his requirements because he is, he has a long lead time. Our other suppliers, for our,
Getting questions from on the Zoom or?
oh yeah, is this not working? Okay. Is this working? No? All right, I can go up there.
No, stay there.
I don't
Just,
We can do it fine, they cannot.
Right, I know, but if I need to go up on the mic, I can do that. I don't think this is, I don't know.
okay.
Okay. Do I need to start over?
No,
Okay, so, where was I? Lead times, yes. So, so our lead time, for our other suppliers in the malt is usually about, 2 weeks or so. So I don't know what the trip, along Erie Canal would be, but 2 days, down the Hudson is really not a difficult, time for us to like come up with a delivery notice for our suppliers. So if we are able to kind of give ourselves that lead time while also putting in the extra time for the travel along the canal and the river would be an amazing ability. And maybe even if we can't use the canal right away, there's a possibility that the truck, I don't know if it would make sense, but the trucks coming from Batavia could go down 90 to the river and then drop off and then do like a kind of a last mile thing so that we're not getting people into the city with extra trucks. Because as we're talking about, and we're both in Red Hook, it can be a disaster down there with 18-wheelers coming and trying to make turns on these city streets, and then it clogs up the arteries. It doesn't matter. Also includes all of the extra cars and people that are along there. So if there's ways that we could utilize it, better and get more vehicles off the streets and utilize the waterways, we're always down to say yes to whatever types of initiatives come along. And, my last goal, and I don't know if this will ever happen, maybe I can talk to you about this, but is we are right on the water at Red Hook Brewery or Strong Rope Brewery in Red Hook. And I literally see Brad and the schooner sail past us to go, to the Ready Center or wherever. And it's just like, if there was a way for us to take that cargo directly to us, it would be an amazing, one of my dreams to see that and just be dropped off, right there, because, it's just, that last mile then becomes last feet, and it becomes, a part of us immediately. And it was also just be an amazing thing to see this ship come sailing in and dropping off our malt, and then we create beer, and then we can enjoy. And I apologize for not bringing any beer today. So, but if you want, you can come down to Red Hook, and we can all sit around and talk about the waterway and talk about beer, and they'll talk about the last mile. So, but at that, I will end my speech and we can have questions.
okay, now comes the trick. We've got to get the mics working.
This one's working. Testing. Hello.
Okay, all right. Here we go. DIY right here at the, so now the audience will not be heard on Zoom. So what, we'll do the same thing. I'll repeat questions, and then the panel now has, and we should put the panel on, please. So, questions.
Can I just
Sure.
say two more
Sure.
things that I omitted before? So, two things I wanted to mention was with Norfolk Tug and Barge, when I discussed the operation of bringing in containers and getting them off, like letting them load in Jersey and bring them in, their container barges are capable of handling 150 40-foot containers for each container, each barge, 150. So if we have 4 or 5 container barges a day, just think about how much traffic would be able to get off the streets. The second thing I wanted to mention was, we're saying, how can we subsidize and pay for all of this infrastructure that we need now? And my thought was from a buddy of mine, it happens in Maine, charge either, so we get 2.5 million packages a day delivered in New York City. If we were to be able to do a surcharge of 50 cents a day per package, that would bring $1.2 million per day for this infrastructure that we need. Or if we need to make it a quarter a package, so this way we're not hurting the consumer, it's still $625,000 a day times 365 days a year. It gives us a lot of resource money so that this way we can build up our infrastructure. Last thing was with the lady in France, when she was saying, what are we going to do with, how are we going to get captains and whatnot? Why don't we see if we can train the truck drivers to become captains on these boats? Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks a lot. First, a question for Brad. I hope I don't want to test you, but can you tell us more about a resident passed away a while ago in Beacon, New York, and he ran a little boat called the Clearwater.
And his name was Pete Seeger.
Right. Have you ever ridden on the Clearwater?
I have been on aboard the Clearwater, yes, and we
good.
have worked with them and collaborated with them. And
Okay.
I will say it's definitely Clearwater's mission, you know, over 50 years now, certainly helped inspire Apollonia's effort, along with the Vermont Sail Freight Project, which was a rice farmer named Eric Andrus up in Vermont who said, I'm going to build my own ship and sail goods from Vermont down to New York City. And
Because that scoop,
he
that
did that.
sloop
Mhm.
was the main cargo
That's right.
for Hudson for hundreds of years.
That's right.
Okay.
And the waterway, you know, the Hudson or the Mohican Tuck, as it is, the river that goes both ways, you know, even before colonial times and the Dutch, that was a means of trade for the Lenape and other tribes in the region. So the roots of commerce on the water or trade by water in this region go all the way back.
I just thought it would be a good thing to introduce that in your talk
Mhm.
because a lot of people in New York know about the Clearwater.
That's
and
right.
Clearwater singers and stuff like that. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
My other question for
Jason.
Jason. Jason is where do you get your water?
Our water is New York. It's just our regular.
And does
through
the
the-
chlorine in it affect your brew?
No. You know, we treat it with you know, we do a little bit of salt additions and other things. We have not put in a full filtration system yet. Some breweries have, and they'll kind of do a reverse osmosis to get it kind of very neutral, and then do whatever they want in terms of adding you know, different salts and different additions to get the needed chemistry that they want for it. We don't treat it, but we do add our own salt additions, which will help kind of accentuate the malt or hops, depending on what the beer is and what we want to do. So, you know, New York's got great water, and so it's a very easy water to work with. And you know, I was an award-winning home brewer, but we also just won an award for our Pilsner in the New York State competition, and gold for that. So yeah, so it's you know, it's great water, and it makes great beer.
And can you sing the Erie Canal song?
Oh, I can't. What's the Erie Canal
Okay,
song?
other questions? Here's.
Hi, I just wanted to say it was really interesting and very educational listening to you. And I feel really happy about like the future of all this for New York City. And I think New York needs to go on an ad campaign to like really turn the public's perception around towards all this. My question for Alana is, you said that your boats would be able to charge at the docking stations. So is that something that also produces emissions, or how do you do that?
Yeah, so ultimately we envision installing renewable energy on site. And so to have a true zero emission operation, so that it's not being powered 100% from the current grid, which is not 100% renewable energy.
Right.
You know, it'll take some further advancement in renewable energy and the affordability and the infrastructure, and it also depends on the site, just like how much the current grid can handle, what are the current power sources that power that grid. But ultimately, we do foresee installing renewable energy like solar panels and battery storage on site. So it, one, allows us to be truly zero emission, but also two, add some resiliency to the operation. And then the dream would be that there's some reverse vehicle to grid, ability, so that we're adding renewable energy to the local power capacity.
And the wind farming that's going to potentially be happening, could that also be closer to your site so you could benefit from that?
Yes. We were bummed when some of the new, ideally we would charge in New Jersey or New York, but we were bummed when the offshore wind projects in New Jersey experienced some setbacks. But yes, we do see that those projects could benefit, powering these vessels.
That's great.
Yeah.
And then my second question, Brad, you wouldn't be able to pull up to Valentino Pier to unload anything? That's not a possibility.
No,
for
it's
you?
dockage in New York City is much trickier than almost anyone understands. It's like there's a dock. You should be able to dock there, right? Not so simple. In some cases, it's very unclear who really in the end controls the ability to dock at a pier or wharf. In others, there are insurance requirements that are rather astronomical. Sometimes people just don't ever get back to you.
Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, the usual things. But there's also with any of the vessels, whether it's a sail freight vessel or a vessel from that Ilana's envisioning, they have requirements. They have draft requirements and they have tie-up requirements and things like that that vary by vessel. In a place like Valentino, I know from working with the Red Hook boaters with their kayaking program there, that is a beach that goes down. It's pretty gentle and pretty shallow there around that pier. And then also the freeboard between the water line, even at high tide, and the place you're looking to dock at. And there's fencing. New York City, and this is maybe me not speaking for Apollonia, me speaking as a person of the waterfront in New York. Why in the world do we keep fencing everything off? It's crazy. When you go to other cities around the world, they don't fence their waterways like we do. And there's this sort of like mindset of litigiousness here, I think, in liability that leads to fenced waterfronts, where in almost any other country, it would be pretty logical that since time immemorial, this pier or this wharf has not been fenced off, because obviously it's a place where there's water and you should behave accordingly, or, ensure that your children aren't jumping off the edge. So anyway, that's a personal statement, not for Apollonia, but it's a real problem actually, because there are so many places along the waterfront where in this hybrid model that we represent, where you could actually pull up to a park and not create emissions, not create truck traffic, etc. You could interface very easily through that park environment. We can't, because there's fencing. And then the other problem is when waterfront parks and other bulkhead conditions are created, they don't have bollards, they don't have cleats. They literally are not designed with an eye to a vessel attempting to dock there. And that could be a historical vessel, a research vessel, what have you. But it goes back to another thing that I think many people in this room are aware of too, was that post 9/11, the massive armada of vessels that evacuated people from lower Manhattan. The waterfront has changed since then, and in many ways, not for the better in terms of vessels' ability to actually dock and effectuate, transfers of people in that manner. So it's really a thing where I think we need to get more public officials, more people from the agencies out on the water, do more tours, where they can see things from the water side perspective and talk with people who actually work in maritime industries on the water around the harbor.
Yeah.
There's a question. I'm going to also do Zoom. Here's someone raised a hand. Let's see how this works. Klaus Jacob. I'll see if Klaus can speak. Klaus, wait. Okay, I should.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
I had a question from Brad Vogel, and you should know that I'm speaking from Piedmont. I saw Piedmont on the Hudson as one of your potential delivery points for the Apollonia. Have you used that pier? And are there any problems because there's silting and water depth issues and so on? And another question, the village of Piermont requires landing permits at the pier for each individual docking. Have you had any problems getting such permits?
No, thanks for the question, Klaus. And yes, we have, because people in Piermont reached out to us and begged to be able to get cargo delivered, and then they proved it with a list of people who were committed to buying those goods. We have, in fact, docked in Piermont and made it a regular stop. And we've had a great relationship with the village there. And it's been quite easy to obtain permission to dock every time. However, it's very interesting you mentioned this because I just received word yesterday that as of yesterday, we are not able to dock there because they are concerned about some engineering or structural issue with the pier, and they are looking into that. So with luck, we will be able to return to Piermont very soon. But thanks again.
Well, there's a major issue with the structural, it's aging. It hasn't been maintained. And it would be
Yes,
a big
this is
capital investment.
symptomatic of our condition right now across this region is we don't have great waterfront infrastructure at the human scale level, I would say. Major container ports, yes. Everything smaller than that, no.
Okay, Brian, can you get up there?
I started with Rich in saying English departments. I probably don't need this. All right, okay, I'll use it. The conference, to use one of my favorite buzzwords, has been very aspirational. I don't get to use it too often, but I really enjoyed it. But I do have just one question for everyone or anyone. At the moment, what kind of political support is there for this overall effort to better utilize the waterways commercially?
So the EDC is extremely involved with trying to help develop it. The borough president of Brooklyn wrote in his speech, he was very pro maritime again, and he wanted to see freight being delivered and distributed through the city via water, so that this way we can alleviate all this traffic. We do have issues though, you know, in Red Hook, 6 or 7 or 8 years ago, when we started doing the parks in Red Hook, that you saw one of the pictures, I had gone to the commissioner, the parks commissioner, and I said, listen, park number 9, it's got a bulkhead. You guys need to bring in dirt to elevate all of these different facilities. So why don't you just bring in 3 or 4 barges as opposed to 2,000 tractor trailers with dirt? And they told me, well, you know, we're not really used to doing that. We have to deal with the Army Corps of Engineers. We have to do this, we have to do that, blah, 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 blah. And they brought in all the tractor trailers with the dirt. So we need to change our mentality. And unfortunately, you know, back to the days when we were using our waterways wisely. And that's what we got to do.
Okay, there's a question over there. I'll just, yes, that's it. Just before you ask your question, I just see a comment here, and it says maybe, and it sort of relates, maybe we need a New York City waterfront saw led by the Brooklyn Waterfront Research Center and the Hanley gang. That's not my mother. She's passed. She's not here anymore. But thank you very much, John. John Antonio from Port Authority.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for this. My question is a little bit tied to what it was brought up at the beginning about the impact of climate change in rivers, and just just that this is a whole larger conversation, especially about climate change that is beyond electric vehicles and beyond energy. And I am wondering if, I mean, you, Brad, that seem to have such a close relationship with waterways, and also in new visionings, Ilana, for it, what it could be, is it considered like the impacts on rivers and kind of the, like thinking about contamination and remediation ways as we're thinking of transitioning, so that we don't make the same mistakes of the past of not nurturing and being stewards for our waterways. So I'm just wondering if that's included in any visioning conversations.
Yeah, no, it's definitely part of our overarching vision of things, but it's the impacts that are in some ways actually ironic for our operations. For example, we are home ported in Hudson, New York, and the vessel ultimately goes out of the water on the hard, as they say, gets taken out of the water, and there's winter repair work done because, as I said, she was built in 1946. So you do, in fact, need to do annual repairs. But the irony is that our season was often limited by when municipalities in the Hudson Valley were willing to put their docks in the water or when they needed to take them out because they were concerned about ice flows damaging their docking infrastructure. And increasingly, we're seeing winters where that threat is no longer in place. The ice boats that used to go out on the Hudson even a few years ago have not been able to go out for a number of years where they literally sail around on the ice. There has been no ice. So ironically, the potential to extend and expand our season because infrastructure might be available is actually growing because of climate change, the problem we're trying to fight. So it's a little bit weird, but there are a lot of things like this when you get into, climate change is change, not just global warming. It's this weirdness that we've been discussing.
Yeah, so like Brad mentioned, surprisingly, there's not many places you could land in New York with a marine vessel. And that's especially true when you have these larger vessels like the ones that we're envisioning, or even car ferries or passenger ferries. The infrastructure, the landside infrastructure that needs to go along with that, there's an extensive permitting process and often environmental assessments. So yeah, there is an eye towards like what kind of impact will, for example, installing a spud barge will have, like how much coverage will it have on the water? Will that have detrimental effects on the ecosystem under said barge, and thinking of that. And then, one thing I love about our organization is that we don't purely come from a logistics mindset. We also have a very big eye to sustainability. My background, our managing partners background, founding Billion Oyster Project and such, we're always thinking about how can we partner with the community to think about how do we, even if we don't think there's a huge environmental impact or any, how can we partner with the community to, capitalize on, water filtration installations and all that. So it's definitely in mind. And also it's naturally part of the permitting process that you have to go through to install some of this infrastructure that's required to make, docking available at certain sites.
And I'll just say one last thing on that note that we actually have a core team member for Apollonia who is our climate strategist, Patrick Nason, who's here with us today, who also teaches at Columbia, but it's foundational for us in terms of how we approach our venture.
That's great to hear. I want to make one last comment because of funding, and we're here with El Puente in Williamsburg, and we're building a coalition just against the BQE basically and the impacts of fright in the community. And I think you were talking about funding, and where we could get that from is also the city has millions and millions of dollars, or requesting millions and millions of dollars to expand highways. And instead of expanding highways, it could be, it's kind of like the redistribution of funds that, like from car-centric infrastructure to other options. So the money is there in certain ways.
Okay, I have a question here, and then there, I think there was one.
Thank you. Ileana, you started to touch on the Sunset Park Wind Farm Distribution Center. That seems like a no-brainer because they're putting in equipment to put onto boats and everything. There's a huge area. It's right next to the highway. So can you say a little more about what the possibilities there and what the interaction would be with EDC or whoever, I guess Equinor?
Yeah. So we've looked at Sunset Park. We looked at like Brooklyn Army Terminal. We're trying to keep in communication with the city to stay up to date on the efforts they're doing in these neighborhoods. Oftentimes, it seems like the city is very focused on these large scale kind of like mini ports. They're not the size of the Port of Newark, but they're still, it seems like the infrastructure they're putting in there is likely going to be able to handle, heavy freight. And so we're trying to fill the need for you know, once those goods come in on trailers, we can move that. But ideally, we would take those goods once they're broken down or sorted and preloaded onto micromobility vehicles or electric vans. We're then moving that into the harder to reach neighborhoods. So we see there's definitely a place for places like Sunset Park where we could integrate with the offshore wind. We could partner with the city on, you know, the infrastructure they're envisioning there to make it, you know, what do they call it? New York City's harbor of the future. But we think we still need to be additive to those efforts. Hopefully that
Okay,
answered
we
it.
have a question there. Yes.
Thank you all. Sailboats from the north coming down and delivering and taking back. It's wonderful. All of you, thank you for being here. With the really large freight, let's take Amazon, for example. Now I gather there must be some type of analysis that they've done comparing air quality or even budgetary concerns, boats versus trucks. I do know that they're now either experimenting or they're about to launch the other way, the last mile, where they're loading barges with electric vehicles packed and sending them to various places in Manhattan. And I only just heard this, and I don't know anybody else does anybody know about this? And is this part of them looking at this because the city is giving them a little push, or they've actually looked at these things and are now taking it seriously?
Yeah, and I'll hand this off to anyone else on the panel who wants to chime in on this, but that is very much in alignment with the city's Blue Highway RFEI that came out. Yeah. So that's sort of what's called for in the actual request for expressions of interest. And responses on that were due back in like end of January. But interestingly, again, as I think some people in the room know, that was sort of this general casting about for information RFEI. But then not even 2 weeks later, there was an RFE put out, request for RFP, request for proposals. And that was about getting someone to design and construct, you know, 6 different nodes around the harbor. So it was sort of like, we're casting a net for all this information, but almost irrespective, it seems to me, of what we get in that net, we know we at least want to do this in terms of actual build out going forward. So all that to say, what you're mentioning, the baby steps are already being taken towards that, but I'll let other folks here who know more chime in.
Mentioning, just a quick follow-up on that, and thank you. Those hubs that you mentioned, those are the ones we read about a few weeks ago. Red Hook wasn't one of them, but for whatever reason, there was 5 that were mentioned. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so the 6 sites that were mentioned in that were those are the sites that were granted grants from the Maritime Administration through the US DOT. So I think that's kind of what informed which sites were included. But yes, there are definitely a lot of pilots going on. The city has definitely highlighted a focus on micromobility and the integration with marine freight. So if you were to look at the RFP that they put out for the downtown Manhattan heliport, there was a request to figure out how we could integrate or create a micro hub at the downtown heliport integrated with marine freight. And so companies like Amazon and UPS are definitely conducting pilots. Now the challenge is getting that to scale. And there's that chicken or the egg problem, because there's desire, but then we have to be cost competitive. We have to be time competitive. Obviously, they want to reduce emissions, but at the end of the day, it's a cost question and a time question. How can we compete with trucking? And how could we do so if there's limited landing sites and we can't scale to reduce those costs? And so we're trying to make the argument, including through our Blue Highways response, that yes, it's expensive initially, but the costs become increasingly competitive with trucking, or even better than trucking, once you take that initial leap and then you scale so that you could have multiple vessels landing at one very expensive site. But if the more you have, the less expensive it becomes. Yeah.
And what can we do in the community? What are any recommendations that
Just,
we can do?
Continue to speak to your representatives and the city. They're interested, but I think there needs to be also some education. we can't just land anywhere. And so there needs to be public-private partnership 100% to make this happen. There needs to be some subsidies and partnership.
Thank you.
One of the things from the business side of things for us is that I think there needs to be a lot of more effort on our part to come up with ideas and solutions for unique partnerships to expand what we do. So one of the things that, I said before, we made about 751 barrels last year. Still wasn't enough for our needs, so we contracted out a little bit. So, that was actually, we brewed 3 times at another facility, and then we brought it over to us via trucks. It wasn't a very long trip, and it, brought it over. But, the partnership, and we just talked about this recently, is there's other facilities along the Hudson and in the area that could brew the beer that we need, because they have larger facilities and they're not quite, in the city. So if we were to brew beer up there and then get that down, we could utilize, Brad or other facilities and whatever to bring it. But like the infrastructure is not necessarily there. Like where there's a possibility of working with someone on Staten Island, like off of Snug Harbor, but there's not a real great dock at the moment. So it's like, this infrastructure needs to come. But if we continue to ask for it, if we continue to like push for that type of thing, then from the business side, we can do it. And, along with talking to representatives and talking to the local governments and talking to other people creating these facilities and helping, build this infrastructure that is needed.
I just also want to say that maybe it's not a big deal, but downtown Manhattan, we're looking at congestion pricing coming in. So when the freight comes in now via boat and it gets onto a bicycle, that's a savings for these organizations or businesses or whatever. So that's, and just think now, Nick, so when Amazon leaves from their warehouse and they come down Van Buren Street and they're delivering in Manhattan, they're going to have to pay the congestion pricing, right?
Yes.
So now they're going to save the congestion pricing there, and all of these packages, and they're going to save the tolls or whatever. I mean, there's savings, and we just got to do it wisely, like you're saying. We don't want to destroy the environment, and that's why we want to try and be, green and clean, and do it like that.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you all.
Okay, and I would like to thank you all for coming and for your questions and for your attention, and to those on Zoom who we can't see, but we appreciate your attendance here. And please help yourselves to some brunch items on your way out. And we have on May 10th, you might want to look for the all-day conference on wind power that is coming up. And so someone mentioned what's going on down at South Brooklyn Marine Terminal. We will have people talking about that and others, other aspects of that. Thank you very much for coming. Those of you watching, goodbye.